Well, safe to say, this confirms the rumours that The Voice is coming back for this season. And I have here with me today to provide deep, insightful, bot perspective analysis. LTG himself, LewisTheGrim.
Hello, everybody.
We thought we could put together some kind of Season 6 preview to cover some of the bases as to what COTM's all about, where it's come from, why it's been absent for the last 3 years, and to give our take on some of the drivers who have signed up for this season.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the point about getting it back started again, because that was literally going to be my first question to you. Why now, considering the last time that I think I saw you IRL, you literally said to me you were not interested in bringing this back again?
I've told so many people I'm never bringing back COTM, and it's been mostly to do with circumstance at home. Just haven't had the space, the platform, or the time to do it. Right now, even though I'm in the middle of a uni course, I need this other side project to keep me motivated as I trawl through literature that just disinterests me, to be honest, and I have to do it to pass this course. So COTM is the perfect opportunity over Christmas into February and March. Perfect side project to just keep me going and just keep me self-managed. And yeah, another reason why I actually wanted to bring COTM back right now was, and shout out to him, Bruffy's resurgence of MCEC. It's the perfect time to capture this influx of new drivers, and that's what's amazed me about the Season 6 signups. The number of new faces that have suddenly just come forward and said, I've been watching the videos, I finally now got the opportunity to take part in this. And they've just, they've filled up D4 and D5, and it still amazes me that these championships still have this pulling power over drivers in drivers out there who once played GTA or who've been watching from the sidelines for all these years.
I mean, you even have to throw in Brady's championships with that as well.
100%. He's been keeping the scene active on Nodo, and credit to him. I wholeheartedly apologise if this coincides with the times that he had in place for some of those events, because he's openly come out and criticised that I only seem to host things as soon as he launches them as well. But it's not like you've had 2 years of no COTM to get things done. But where I'm going with this is the fact that it's championship season. It feels big and coincidentally, this is tied in with the release of new cars with the casino DLC. It was completely unintentional. Just the launch of MCEC and the circumstances that I've got available to me right now made me click and just made me ask, well, why not?
But what do you think this means for the player then? What are these guys going to get out of it?
Going from that, let's talk about the reaction that the trailer got. The tens and tens of you who viewed it now, it's gone up to a few hundreds now.
I think I watched it about 10 times.
Yeah, I love how daft it is, and then it suddenly hits that serious tone, with the nighttime montages, and I brought up Kidovi's bird's eye view of the 811 race going through Zancudo and then Tongva Hills, and oh wow, it just brought back that magical feeling, like, oh, we once had this. I'm in that snake going down the Tongva Hills, and yeah, it just putting that together really triggered the magic for me, and just announcing it in the Slack chat as well, and the sudden burst of life that injected the chat with that night, like last week. It's made it all worthwhile. I think it's definitely been worth it.
Well, to be fair, we have been telling you to do this again for months and months and months now, so it's about time that it finally got through.
Yeah, it's high time it finally got done. About time it finally got through. It's like I say, it's been circumstance, and I have just impulsively decided to throw myself into this. I know everybody's on board to help out. Everybody's been clamoring for this for ages, and that's just a true privilege, honestly. So let's. Yeah.
All right. So give me an idea of the format, what you've got going on behind the scenes. Is there anything largely different to this compared to what people perhaps in the old days returning that they might be used to, what they might not be used to? Anything worth noting?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm sorry to say that it's largely the same in terms of format, production, and whatnot. I've still got the same templates saved on my laptop and whatnot. But for the sake of ease and for the sake of balancing this uni life and degree and everything, it's going to be easier to just reuse what I've got. I can't reinvent the wheel. The wheel. See how I did that?
Can't be doing the puns. Just pretend I didn't hear that. No, but that's not true. I mean, maybe you had some teams existing in the background to help you before, but you've drafted me and a few other people into like a track testing team. I know you've spoken about a car selection team. Is this a carryover philosophy compared to previous seasons, or have you largely sort of thought, right, we're going to finish off this current generation of consoles, this current generation of GTA, make it a big bang, and I'll actually do it properly and get as many people involved rather than me taking the reins for everything?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was very much what season 5 had going for it, because although there was no coverage on my channel of season 5, but so what people didn't get to see was how autonomous that season was. People are quick to forget that season 5 had way over 100 signups. We're on 70 now. Well, season 5 was by far the largest sign up rate for anything that I've ever seen on GTA, and that stretched through the Division 6. And the first waiting list race, I just checked it back the other day, had 20 plus players in it. So that was absolutely astronomical for something racing based, and it really makes me lament about the spotlight that Rockstar took off GTA racing back in that day where they gave us a chance for Bruffy and G Unit to have a go at it. Side by side, crew versus crew. It's a shame that the spotlight's been taken off racing.
From my perspective, yes and no, because I find that I suppose that a lot of these kind of like subcultures that exist within gaming communities, there's a fine line between overexposure and a collective niche. And I even know that the player rates has been like slowly declining as the games. I mean, it's easy to forget that this game came out in September 2013, wasn't it?
It's incredible.
Like a lot of people joke and say, yeah, the player number's gone down, but the actual core strength number of people that continuously either stick with it or come back, and it never leaves the back of the mind, even if they give it a bit of a rest for a while. I personally think that as far as hosting things like COTM, I personally think that we've got a very healthy number of competitive races, but also like consistent races in terms of it being a healthy number of people to keep these kind of things going, but not sort of unpopular enough to sort of make you question what's the point in doing all this. So if you look at the D1 drivers, for example, there's some pretty not just interesting and competitive races, but interesting characters in there. And I think that if you have an overpopulation of people playing the game, then you don't have these characters that I think even people who aren't on PlayStation taking part in COTM, a lot of them probably do even watch something like COTM and think, oh, I wonder how such and such is getting on, because I've seen their YouTube clips and I quite like them. I always remember, even before he was one of the first Kings of the Mountain, I always remember watching like AWes, for example, and this was back when I was on Xbox, and I thought to myself, oh, I wonder how AWes is getting on. Like, he was just like one of those drivers that I just felt had an affection for, and there was no particular reason for it. I just wanted AWes to do well.
Everybody liked AWes, the mysterious.
I think the more people, it's good that a championship like this attracts the numbers that it does, but if you have too many, then it almost kind of dilute these characters.
Certain characters, yeah, and is that what?
Go on. I know you're either burning to disagree with me or add something controversial or interesting.
No, it's probably right. Can so many big characters exist in one competitive format? I wouldn't say that was the determining factor that sort of made the competitive scene fall apart. It was very much those two streamers sort of giving up on the competitive scene, Shaggy disappearing to do his own thing, and Bruffy veering off to pursue his streaming. So what I tried to do with COTM was to remind everyone that there were still those characters out there that needed that platform to showcase the amazing skill that they had, because G Unit nor Bruffy were necessarily the top drivers of their time, all as good as Shaggy was. But from different crews, particularly because they were very British based, you had all these European guys that nobody had ever heard of racing in Perth at the time, and they exuded so much skill, and they didn't necessarily have the communication skill. So with me having taken on exchange students and whatnot, I'm more willing to give those guys just the time of day and the patience to get them involved. So I kind of brought those two worlds together, and COTM Season 1 was very much worlds collide in terms of those who'd been frequent G-Unit stream attendees, and the Perth guys that were extremely quick that nobody had heard of, and suddenly that rubbed up the British guys the wrong way, and there was that big fallout around season 1, race 4, and everything kicked off. But we got through it. We applied penalties where necessary. We laid the groundwork. We laid down the law, and everything got on fine after that.
There's that teacher mentality coming out, I think.
Yeah, I know. Can't switch it off sometimes.
So, with the risk of us potentially getting too far off topic, I want to bring you back to the divisions that we currently have going into season 6. Well, I guess we can make a start with D1. Maybe Absolutely. Go down as many as we can, and if we don't get to all the divisions, we can speak about some names that stand out to us in some of the bot divisions that I will be partaking in. I offer the bot perspective for this podcast, by the way. Let's go to D1 then. Do you have anything in particular you want to say about the drivers that you've picked? Anything? Well, I mean, you have largely picked them based on playlist performance and sort of your own ideas over time. Is there anything you want to add to that in particular? Anything you're looking forward to with that lineup?
So I've knocked up a prospective grid. And of course, it sees the playlist dominator sat at 15th place on the grid, usually having it in D1 where the fastest driver will start last and try to make their way through the field. And it's got to be Leatherkate. There's no one else to... It's without question got to be Leatherkate based on his unbelievable adaptability, no matter whether he's in a slow car or a quick car. He's the only person who just puts everyone else to shame, showing up in a playlist and winning with ease, playing his Conor McGregor quote at the end of it. And as much as that gets everybody riled up, it's unquestionable that Leatherkate is our top consistent driver. I've knocked up as a potential number 14, Ryan W1. So Ryan is absolutely laser focused on winning something, having not had the chance to in earlier seasons. So there's no doubt with his hot lapping ability that he will be right up there in title contention, giving it his all.
I mean, okay, let's give a case for Silent Driver then, moving up the list.
Yeah, so Silent Driver is exactly what it says on the tin. The most silent of drivers. Occasionally, very rarely coming on the mic yet, dipping in and out of playlists, sometimes when Leatherkate's there or when he's not there, and sweeping the floor with everybody in there. He's my prospective number 13 driver on the grid, starting right at the back, because he just cleans up whenever he joins, and nobody can really keep up with that consistency and pace. And again, it's all about adaptability. Which is where these grids are coming from. It's about not who can just take a car and practice for the event, one race at a time and master one car that maybe they're either familiar with or give up quickly on because it's new. Silent Driver, the Leatherkates, even the Ryans, they have that. I think the key word today is adaptability. And
would you put Revelantis in that category?
100%. That's why I put them side by side. Silent Driver and Revelantis. They're my top two next to Leatherkate.
This was something I was going to mention about Leatherkate before we started mentioning other drivers. I think something that's the two large determining factors that I think we're going to have to talk about when it comes to who's the most likely to be king of D1 is going to be not just who's going to be able to make their way through the very, very competitive grid. With going through having suffered the least amount of incidents and accumulating the most consistent amount of points, but there's also going to be a lot of strategy involved with regards to your sort of average grid position for each round, if that makes sense, because you touched upon it as well. If some exceptionally quick drivers in D2, which we haven't discussed yet, make it into the second race and then start populating the high up positions on the grid, then all of a sudden drivers who need to be, if we're sort of hypothetically saying Leatherkate is going to hit the ground running, the drivers that need to be outscoring him, the more competitive that D2 is in that rotation, the less likely they are to be able to get up and ahead and take advantage of their better starting positions compared to Leatherkate. And can they run away before your Leatherkates, Ryans and Silent Drivers get back up the grid themselves?
Yeah, so that's something that you can compare to previous seasons. And those drivers who you would expect to just run away with things, take the Gyrogs, take the Deuce Gods, they've had pole position starts in previous seasons. It may not have been them, but drivers of their ilk. And yeah, you would just expect this runaway performance, and yet either due to lack of practice, just thinking that we've got pole here, my natural pace and just sort of comfort with the car on this track will be enough to carry me to an easy win. It hasn't been the case because of the tenacity and the motivation of Leverkate starting 15th, and the Leverkates or the Murphoses, the Jodkiefs of the days gone by, and it's all been strategy. It's all been pit stop strategy, and no matter how you try to prevent it from happening, they'll just come out in front of you if you take your foot off the gas, and that can very much be the case of those D2 drivers that come up and immediately become complacent by their top 5 start.
All right, I'm going to give you a couple of questions now that I think will nicely wrap up the D1 talk for us. I want you to give me your prediction for, maybe, if not just the winner, maybe the race 1 winner, top 3 maybe, and maybe give a shout out to somebody in that list of drivers who you think, obviously they're all exceptionally quick drivers, they deserve to be there, but if there's one there that you perhaps expect to get a result that is perhaps beyond your and everybody's expectation, give me some candidates. Let's get some conspiracy. Let's get some controversy going.
Lou's been talking it all that in the chat, so I want to see Lou take it from 5th to an easy dub. I reckon Lou's got the potential to do that. I see Squizzix, Banky, Flaming, and myself all choking it away. Gyrogue is unstoppable on his best day, but you know those connection issues are going to hold him back. Dewscod's another one. I'm saying Lou P1, Dewscod P2, and Leverkate P3.
Ooh, only 3. Ooh, well, that's a challenge then. I imagine even from 15th, him and Ryan must have their eyes set on number 1. So that's a pretty bold.
Gyrogue's wiping out Ryan.
A pretty bold prediction.
Gyrogue is taking out Ryan. It's happening. And somehow Revelantis and Silent will crash right into the middle of it. It'll create the Red Sea, the party of the Red Sea, and through will go the red car.
So do you honestly think Lou's going to be your dark horse then? Would you put him as dark horse material for this?
Dark horse Lou.
Dark horse Lou. You see, I think that we've perhaps, in my opinion, overlooked a name that we probably should be talking about a bit more just on this list. Squizzix.
Okay.
From P6 starting grid, I think he should win that. I'm putting a bit of pressure on you now, but I think he's going to win this.
That is a bold statement.
And a dark horse, it's probably going to be the worst prediction you've ever heard, but based on some of my limited time of hot lapping and how I've gauged each driver in this list's engagement with how they hot lap and their dedication to it, if his connection holds up in Fonte, I mean, okay, it might not be the most outright quickest in that list, but if he puts in the amount of time and dedication to this that I've seen him do for other tracks and other cars, then from a P2 starting slot, I reckon in future rounds that connection issue that we've all had with drivers like him and Gyrogue might come back and bite him. But if he can get away, avoid Tommy Young's, which is a difficult thing to do.
Tommy.
And I think he's got the potential to. Oh, I never even mentioned Creek. I reckon he could run away with it.
He's in the Tommy Creek sandwich, isn't he?
he's my dark horse for this. I think. I would have put you up there as well, but I think that from D9 and given some of the hotheads around you, I mean, and I'm not putting Flaming Gun as a hothead, but he's been out of the game for a while. Will that pressure and rustiness come back to haunt him and unsuspecting drivers around him?
That's it.
Yep.
So there are our predictions for D1. You've heard it here first. For me, Lou P1, Dewscod P2, and Leverkate P3 for reasons previously stated. Let's have a quick look over the D2 bracket. Newcomer Secklist. I've taken people's word that Secklist doesn't belong in Division 3 or below. So I'm taking a big risk by putting him in D2.
Well, I suppose that's largely what the first round is for. I mean, you've got Dan Burtz as well, Xbox convert, repping the disjointed hands brigade. Are there any names in there who you feel you wish either in the back of your mind or if you could extend the number of places in D1? Are there drivers in there who straight away jump out at you and think, I've had to put you in D2, but if I had my way, you would be in D1 as well? And
no.
Really? You don't think so?
I'm going to say that right away. I don't think so.
Starlit Shadows?
Starlit Shadows. I haven't seen him racing for ages.
Ronnie Ronline?
You know what Ronline's like. Dan Verts is quick. Dash Shaggy is basically Gyrogue 2.0.
Oof.
No, in a good way. Not 0.5.
Is there a good way to say that?
Dash Shaggy on the track he's got all the potential in the world to be Gyrogue 2.0. Is he as quick as Gyrogue? That's something to be determined. Colin is another big shout. Colin on the right day is very much. You see, this D2 often becomes this sort of hot lapper division, and it always is for race one. They always perform well in non-contact hot lapping circumstances, but do they have that staying power? Do they have that adaptability to take them further?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. If I can just relate something based on the lineup that we have here for D2, based on my personal experience, that I think potentially adds to the dynamic, and that makes D2 quite an interesting one to watch. And I look forward to seeing people's perspectives from D2, not just for this race, but for the whole season. But from my personal experience, if we just cast our minds back to the largely, I'm sorry about this, Obst, largely forgettable last round of the Formula E Championship. I was teammates with a certain D2 driver known as Shizmix, and I don't know how much this is really saying either for him or to denounce myself, but I personally think that on his day, and in terms of outright just pure speed and ability, I would genuinely rate Shizmix above myself. And given that we were teammates, I was going into that season thinking, oh, well, we might not win the championship ourselves, but we might have a go at this in the team championship.
Yeah.
And he quite largely let me down. Sorry, Shizmix, I'm outing you there. You let me down, and there's a specific reason why I'm bringing this up. It's because you've got all the potential and all of the ability you could ask for in a raw rookie talent, if you have to call him that really for this. And yet when it comes to the day, when it comes to a length race that's beyond just simply a 15-minute playlist race, you either choke or you get into this head that I'm not as quick as Leatherkit right out of the box in my hot lapping, I better stop trying, and then it all falls flat for you.
Falls apart from there.
In that particular championship, I had no right to outscore you, and I only outscored you because I've got that kind of determination, and I don't have the ability that drivers in that division or above. I'm nowhere near as good as these guys, just from personal perspective, on raw ability. But what has got me up there in the past is that I compensate with the determination and the smoothness, and I might not necessarily sweat as much as them, but I have this different mindset that I think, not necessarily if you have to compensate, but I do think that there is a certain mentality shift that some drivers in that sweaty D2 kind of mold, a lot of them
lack.
A lot of them lack.
I'm looking at Mario, I'm looking at Shizmix, I'm looking at Yaroon possibly, I'm looking at that Shaggy Supply if he gets down in the dumps there. I'm looking at those guys. Do they have that staying power? Do they have that mental focus to maintain a D1 position and perform to the best of their ability from the front of a D1 race and hold off those faster drivers who they should be beating with the advantage that they're given from the start?
Any dark horses that we haven't already mentioned?
Dark horses for D2 based on who's going to put the most effort in. Tough one. You see, out of nowhere, the darkest of all dark horses has to be Brinker.
I was literally going to say him as well.
Talk about someone who's not been on the scene for God knows how many years, shows back up in a playlist and is like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm Brinker and I'm fast. He's just immediately on the pace. And he's in the party chat. He's talking the whole time. It's not like he's even, whether that's his way of concentration. He's fully integrated into the community and he's straight back on pace. It's abnormal. You don't see drivers like Brinker. You don't see other drivers doing what Brinker's done and just coming back and just being arguably even better than they were because new techniques have developed over the years. Yeah,
and I think that, I've not known, I can barely say that I know Brinker, but from the interaction that I've had, you just spend a couple of minutes reading some of the responses from these people in the chat and how they interact and engage with the banter and how they react to people throwing down lap times. And he seems like the kind of guy of all of them that would look at a gauntlet being thrown down in the chat, no matter what its accuracy, and think, screw it. I know my ability and I'm going to do the best of my day and your time doesn't matter to me. Okay, then give me a bit of an insight into the wheel. Can we expect to see a large influx of a lot of the newer cars? Are you actively trying to usher in a lot of these newer cars, depending on how broken they are? Is that something that's actively on your mindset, or is this potentially getting into the secrets of the wheel that we shouldn't know as mere mortals?
As mere mortals, and as you know, the wheel has a plan for all of us. So that is a fantastic question because we've just literally been talking about that in the COTM Slack chat. DuScott has criticized the fact that the Komodo has even been included on the wheel, but it's all about exactly that. The word of the day is adaptability, and the fact that we're given some of these new cars with slightly quirky handling characteristics presents and poses a new challenge in what will soon be 2020. nobody wants to see reruns of 9F 1 make, Feltzer Turismo 1 make. We need to freshen things up. I'm so glad the Schlagen's come up in 2 divisions. The Komoda dominates D1, literally throwing the new breed of cars into the limelight, into the spotlight, as driven by the fastest guys and the most consistent guys you'll see being streamed on this game. We will show you what these new cars are capable of before anybody else will, and I'm so glad that we have the platform to be able to do that.
I think that's a very interesting way of looking at a potential, and not a direct, but a potential kind of interest factor that not just D1 but all the divisions, assuming that these cars are being unleashed by sweat-worthy people. Yeah, it's a very interesting tool, and it gives you a perspective on the potential of these cars that an arbitrary lap time by the self-proclaimed Stig of GTA.
Yeah, well, I mean, not to knock that testing, because it is absolutely spot on. Well, I have to say that Asbo lap. Please go and do that third apex again. The fact that these tracks try to mirror the newness and freshness of the cars as well. We're always trying to break down barriers with COTM, whether that's from 2 crews who never got along and suddenly now do. We're bringing people together, and we're driving the newest cars to the best of their abilities.
So on that note, that's just instantly made me think of a question that largely relates to something that you touched on when we started this section, with regards to a lot of the kind of comments that typically surface on the Slack chat or around certain people when a certain car comes up that either some people deem it's too much, or it's too extra, it's too difficult,
yeah,
or it's too well. I suppose my question to you in that regard is, it's not to necessarily say knock the perspective that those people have, but the people taking part in this that go on and make these kind of complaints, they obviously to a degree do not share that kind of image for the championship that you do. So I suppose my question to you would be, what do you kind of have to really say, or how do you feel about?
So yeah, I mean, it's easy for me to answer. I say tough, because what COTM is all about is breaking away from those cars that you're so comfortable with and that you can drive almost with your eyes closed, that you've had so many years to get comfortable with, and trying to master something a little bit different, something that doesn't necessarily agree with your driving style. And honestly, the number of people who have said, well, I'm buying this car after the race, I had no idea it would turn out to drive so well. They haven't even tried it. They haven't even given it a go. And in hot lapping and trying to take the lines that you normally take is one thing, and discovering that it doesn't quite do what you wanted it to do over certain curbs, having to adjust the line and then seeing how that affects the race, knowing that everybody has to take those lines, really adds this interesting dynamic to D1 and the rest of the divisions. You have to have that. I'm gonna say it again. Adaptability.
Well, I not in a COTM sense, but in a playlist about a year or so ago now, I think I came to that kind of same epiphany that you talked about with the Sentinel Classic. That was a car that until that particular playlist, I'd never driven before, and it is completely the opposite to everything that I would say is a car that is built around my particular driving style and my characteristics. But I had so much fun and enjoyment trying to understand it and adapt myself to get the best out of it. And I think I ended up tumbling down the places after a mistake on the last lap. But for a while, I was up there, and it felt more rewarding being up there, knowing that I was understanding it and getting it cracked.
Yeah, you'd mastered that car.
Yeah, because this the reason why I asked the question. Really, is because it seems that that to have that appreciation, not just in terms of the championship as a whole, but from a self perspective of what you extract from the enjoyment out of the challenge that you've presented with this championship, it seems to require a certain type of mentality and a certain mindset that not everybody has. And I suppose the reason why I asked you that question is, I know you've obviously answered by saying tough, but you've kind of got to meet the expectations and the challenges. And I'm not going to put people in this category of, oh, they just want to drive a Feltzer and a 9F and a T20 every single time. Mm-hmm. But some people might approach this question, if they were being hypercritical, and saying, well, there is a fine line between a car that's a fun challenge and a car that's a challenge but not enjoyable. Is that something you just don't entertain? Is that something that's not going to influence future card selection?
It's a really good question because there's so many people in the Slack chat that would like to know the same answer. And the answer pretty much is, if it's been given to this game and it's not broken to the degree of having engine rev limiters or being unmanageable from personal experience, having driven those cars in, day out in staggered playlists and having got to grips with them and having overcome that sort of initial disgust factor of these cars, which a lot of people face when they're driving them for the first time, I can promise them that they will learn to love these difficult cars for the reward aspect that you just mentioned.
Or even if it doesn't go beyond that race in particular, I personally see the worth and the value of rising to that challenge. You don't have to go away from these races thinking, oh, this now has to become my new favorite car, or this is going to take pride and place in my garage. But the fact that it's surely the value is not so much in in seeing this championship as being something that has to be just purely for the tried and tested. Even if you pick that car, you've mastered that car, you never race that car again, you'll look back at that round and think, I cracked that car, I did a better job than everybody else, and even if I didn't, I gave it a really good go. The fact that you may never drive that car again really doesn't matter, because that's really taking away the value of COTM as you've presented it, I think. I'm largely on board with that philosophy, I think.
And that's it. And then days, weeks, months, years, even later, you've still got that black and yellow Dinka Blister Compact sitting in your garage. Oh, that's the D's B's GP car. I hated the understeer and the propping of that track, but wow, the battle that we had around there, the endless sort of grind to manage that understeer all the way around was a memory I'll keep with me. So that becomes your D's B's GP car. It remains untouched. And you're reminded of the challenge that it presented even years later on. So I
think I kept my vision from the last round of season 5. I don't think I've driven it since. It's just a car that I didn't like.
So leave in the comments what your special car is and what memory is associated to it. Either competitive or just an unforgettable playlist race. But I'm guessing it's going to be on the event side. Which car do you just leave unchanged? You can't bring yourself to customize it because it holds that special memory.
With regards to tracks, do you have anything in particular you want to say on the tracks, whether it be your degree of thinking with location? Is there going to be a particular theme to certain selections that you haven't employed in previous seasons?
The only way that often differs is the sort of theme round. So I've got a team of dedicated track testers this time, and I'm very much leaving it in their hands simply because I don't have the time to do it. I've very much overseen the track selection in previous seasons, wanting to break new ground, and that hasn't always gone as well as I thought it was going back then. Looking back at some of the track choices now makes me cringe a little bit. Yet we took them on. We tackled them, and this season it has to be the best selection of tracks we will ever see, simply because the tracks of 2019 have lamppost removal. It's taken them that long to implement the feature, but you will see the pinnacle of track selections this season.
Well, we have the tools for this season that previous seasons didn't have, and from conversations that I remember having with you on Slack a few weeks ago, that seems to be, just from my perspective, something that you've adopted now compared to what you have done in the past, where there's certain sections of your approach to the critique of tracks in terms of what's good, what's not so good, in consideration for COTM that you perhaps wouldn't have had in previous seasons because we now have the tools available. So lamppost removal, you're putting that up there as kind of, that's an absolute must, as and when appropriate. So that's automatically going to have a shift in the quality.
But to go back to your question in terms of themes, the area by area, week on week sort of schedule is very much the same. So this first week targeted Del Perro, and in particular, I should roll my R's there. I haven't lived in Spain for 5 years. The Del Perro freeway. That was very offensive to all Spanish people. Carmen, I apologize if you're listening. So we're focusing on Del Perro.
She's not listening to this.
No way. If she makes it this far. Going back to the original point, it's very much going to follow the regime of each week dictating a particular region, and I entrust my track testers to pick 4 tracks from that region. I'm looking forward to the themes, though. The themes can be completely different, whether it's an electric theme all across the board, and in which case we'll see very different paces going throughout, whether it's some kind of 4-door theme. Anything can come up with regards to vehicle selection, track selection, and I like the sort of ambiguity that brings with it.
So would you say that is it potentially too late for people if they think they've got a track that would be worth considering for selection that potentially needs a little bit of work doing on? Is it too late for them to get back into Creator and do something for this, or would you encourage them to get back and potentially, I don't know, give you some food for thought with regards to tracks that you potentially haven't yet considered?
Have a look at the track selection video, see what gets voted outright. If your prop work is looking something similar to that, if it has as many stunt pieces across the floor to smooth out certain parts that track has, or in this first week, I'm suspecting that there will be a lack thereof. People don't like smoothing, and it's coming through. There's very much a drive to return to original roads because stunt sectors just they interrupt and interfere with the racing experience in terms of the curb opportunities that they provide. So people are very much reverting back to refined land races, and shout out to AWS7 for putting together some of the most refined land races. I find myself more and more wondering why we ever turned to stunt props. They should only be used as a tool to aid a land race, and that's all they should be used for, rather than come up with these crazy, unraceable, curb boost ridden monstrosities that plague other championships. And you'll certainly see a return to form in terms of track selection this season.
What shall we give a shout out to the bots? I think the bots need talking about. You could almost argue the bots are the lifeblood of COTM. Not competitively, but
yeah, from signups 55 and downwards, pretty much. These are the guys that have absolutely filled up D4, D5, and the guys who've expressed their interest on the back of the trailer going live. I've had so many people messaging me on PSN, mostly through Colin. So shout out to Colin for hooking everybody up from the whichever crew's playlist. I should know the crew really, so I could shout them out properly. The crew that Colin races with, trying to get as many people as he can interested in COTM. So we've filled up the grid with guys like Captain Mousecop, who joined last night's playlist at the time of recording and was blown away by how quick some of our slower guys were. So wait until he sees what D1 is truly capable of.
So again, I'm largely asking you this question knowing the answer, but are there any drivers there who you think, you know what, they're gonna surprise us all? They're gonna go straight from D4 or D5 and absolutely do a 0 to hero, get straight up to D1, or start troubling some people and be a real. And we've talked about some dark horses and surprises. Are there any names there that you think, not necessarily now, but they might pull a surprise on you?
Whoever Murphos is in disguise. I'm sure some of these guys are signing up under false accounts. I got one just now from someone called Phoebe, I think, who's just. It just looks like the most obvious second account name sign up. Anyway, let's see if Phoebe gets all the way up there. I'm assuming someone like that will. From the rest of them, it's difficult to say. It depends how fast IME 10 is on the day, now known as Fusion Delta. So we'll see.
I don't know. There's a couple. It's sort of slightly going back to a thing we touched on with some of the D2 drivers, but it's even more infuriating. And I'll speak about this from the bot perspective. I see some of the names so far included in D4 and D5, and what really frustrates me is I can genuinely see that if either with more time or with a slightly different level of perspective and approach to preparing for these races in this championship, I can see that there's so many drivers here who, if they cut out just the absolute stupid nonsense mistakes that they seem to make at least 1, 2, or 3 of every single race, then there's no reason why they shouldn't be up there.
And do you know why that happens half the time? It's that they've got this sort of ingrained mentality that they must be repeating every technique that the D1 drivers are using. So when they're on certain straights, they'll see a curve and they'll think, oh, a D1 driver would go for that curve. So they veer off, completely shake themselves off the line. They're not anticipating a bump in the middle of the road. And that's it. They're in a palm tree, they've hit a bus stop, they're barreling across the track, and their race is pretty much over. Or what's even funnier still to this day is people attempting brake boosts not in last gear. Just literally the equivalent of pressing the brake pedal on a straight. You're slowing yourself down. So until you've mastered short shifting into those final gears earlier than the rest of your grid, you shouldn't be worrying about curb boost. You shouldn't be worrying about curb lines, these sort of secret behind the bus stop lines, and you certainly shouldn't be worried about brake boosting. Just focus on that race length consistency, which, coming from someone who's done 5 seasons of this, is absolutely the focus. As long as you get that consistency down, just like I did on Postal Circuit, you can manage to come out in front as long as you've got the general pace and a good starting position.
I mean, just looking at some of these drivers as well, just to finish up on that, like the last few weeks and months, I'm just to pull a couple of names out. I've been watching some of Pointless's streams when he was doing some of his Feltzer races. Was that in the championship you were discussing with Young Brighthawk and Leathercate?
The Money Cup.
Yeah,
as far as I can.
I watched some of his streams of that, and I've raced quite a lot of all those drivers. I've raced quite a lot with with Obst in the past, and I've seen a lot of his videos. And then either through Pointless's streams or Obst videos, I'll watch maybe like the first 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll be seeing like driving technique and a display depending on where in the map it is and how much they like or are familiar with the car. And I'll think, now why do you get the reputation that you get, or why is it that I always seem to see you quite low down in playlist orders? Because they'll be running in say second, third, and then I'll go away, do something, come back, and all of a sudden they're in 10th, 11th. And I'm thinking, now what happened? What happened to you to get you? And it's that's the thing. If I genuinely think, or I rather hope, if not them, then I do think that from some of the names that I've seen we'll just look at D4 in particular, there's definitely potential for 1 or 2 drivers in there that if they address that particular issue with their driving style, there's no reason why, and we'll put a cap on this, there's no reason why they couldn't, in the space of 2 or 3 races, get up to D2,
yep,
survive in D2, and then all of a sudden they've gone from coming into this championship thinking, I'm just a D4 driver and I'm here for a bit of a laugh, to all of a sudden, oh, look at this, I'm up there and I ought to be up there.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of self-confidence that some people in this division lack. And I do think that based on how I've seen the competitiveness from personal experience in the latter rounds of the previous season, how I've seen some of the competitive statures of the lower divisions, depending on the interest and how I mean, what was it, for example? I think I joined last season in race 5, and I think a few people even made the slight sort of tagline that Division 6 was the most competitive division of all of them, just because of the number of returning names. That was a baptism of fire for me. It was like a month after I had my PlayStation, and I joined Division 6, and then I found myself getting spanked by the first 6 and then beating the lower 6 comfortably. I think, what's going on here?
What the hell's happened here? Yeah, exactly.
And I know that was a bit of a slight one-off, because for some reason a lot of drivers particularly returned to that round, so that it was an offset. But these kind of drivers do exist in these divisions, and it's too easy to get into that mindset of thinking, oh, I'm a D4 driver, this is where I should be. That's, in a lot of these cases, that's really not the case, and I hope that they bring a little bit more to their game than just driving around thinking this is where I ought to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
It'll make the top divisions more interesting.
Hear that, D4? That's your motivational speech from LewisTheGrim.
Bots United, come on.
Bots United. He has faith in you, you see. He has the faith. This is why we brought him on the podcast, to give you that inspiration to get up those, climb the mountain, get up to those higher divisions. So I think we're going to wrap things up there. It's been a pleasure to have you come along and join me for this on the most impromptu, it always is with us, the most impromptu meeting with the most impulsive decision. I didn't even know we were going to be doing this tonight, but apparently we are. It's probably been far more incoherent than we think it's been. Lots of droning, monotonous rambling based on our enthusiasm over the participants of COTM. But no, staying positive.
I mean, nobody asked for a podcast from the guy who said that this was never going to come back, and the driver that you've never heard or cared of. But there you go, you've got it, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. Cheers.
Right, well, if you managed to make it to the very end of this podcast, you should pat yourself on the back and feed yourself a cookie. It's obviously not something that Lewis and I have ever really attempted before, and it's probably quite apparent from the lack of structure. I've tweaked the order a little bit and move some things around just to ensure that it didn't end up becoming a constant stream of talk about divisional drivers, but I'm quite happy with how it all turned out. If this has sparked some interest in COTM, you'll find all the details you need to sign up to the championship in the pinned comment below. Leave a like, leave a subscribe if you'd like, and I will see you in the Race 1 highlights, hopefully. Bye for now. Good night.